Welcome. This is all minus one quick shots. So folks, summer is upon us. We've been having great weather. Been a little bit of rain, we expect that. It's April. April showers bring May flowers, as they say. And with the beginning of summer, we are trying to figure out what is going on with the actual season. Are we in riot season now, or are we in COVID season? I don't know. What I do know is that the incident that happened the other day was a failure to train once again by police departments. This is a huge issue, a gigantic issue, folks. This isn't because all cops are bad. It's because they're not trained well and people go into law enforcement for the wrong reasons, usually for authority and power, some to help the community, some. Or you got the in-betweens, guys like me, who was like, I needed a job at the time. Wasn't really my desire to do such a thing, which is why I never worked or tried to work patrol. May have made my life easier, would have had a bigger paycheck. May have made my life worse too. It's hard to say. But for me, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to make a career of it. The fact that I worked for 13 years with the sheriff's department at the jail and doing transports and whatever else, just not something I had dreamed for myself. It becomes a thing that you're like, oh, there's a retirement ahead. There's this, there's that, there's whatever. This is steady. I have good benefits. That was a huge deal, man. My benefits through the county, they were awesome. I paid like $100 a month for insurance. They paid 90% of the cost. My insurance was great. Almost everywhere took it. Those are the things that get people into law enforcement. At the same time, I think starting wage was $30,000 a year. Might have been up to 32 when I left. When I started, it was still, I forget what it was. It's like 20, 25 or something. Not very high. And it depends. It depends on where you live. In bigger cities, these guys start off at like $60,000. But in the cities alone, they still need to have roommates in apartments or live with mom and dad because that's not enough to get by. And I bring all this up because the incident that happened was 1,000% about a failure to train. Because you have all these factors and these people are working all the time, but they're not getting training. They're not getting quarterly training. They're not getting weekly training. They're not getting monthly training. They're getting annual training once a year to check a box off. And some departments are better about this than others. So real quick, I want to play the video that caused all of the nonsense. And really, the nonsense isn't caused by anything that actually happened. I'm going to address that here in the latter half, but just up front, I want to talk about the police actions because this is most important. Now, I will not show this entire video, and there is a reason for that, and the reason is simply that YouTube just will not approve if I do such a thing. So, here it is. So he bolts, he runs in the car, and they're going to try to extract him. And here I'm going to cut it. Now, if you can go find this yourself, this is the gentleman that they were going after. He did not have a gun. This is another picture of him. Here is another picture of him with his gangster money. I would assume his drug money. I mean, ridiculous, right? But they went to the vehicle. The female police officer drew her firearm and she thought she had a taser. This is a clear indication to me that she was not well trained. Let me explain something to you folks. When you get taser trained, when you're taser certified, they make it very clear that you should be drawing your taser from your left hand or your weak hand. Now, there are some places that do a cross-side draw, meaning they draw from the cross side with their dominant hand. Unfortunately, that can be confusing in the heat of the moment. And what happens in that video is you see the woman pulls her pistol obviously a Glock, and says, taser, 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 which is protocol, what you're supposed to do. It's what actually taser teaches to do in their training. And she goes, boom. She meant to shoot a taser, one trigger pull, into the guy. I don't know why she didn't see why there wasn't a light on, why there wasn't a red dot there. There should be a red laser beam coming out of the taser. She was not well trained. She was not trained to be inoculated from stress. The incident was too stressful for her. Her gross motor skills were shutting down, and essentially she didn't have the wherewithal to understand that she had a Glock in her hand. This is an honest mistake. This is a tragic mistake, and it's a mistake that the cop should be fired over, frankly. I mean, you just can't. You can't be like, oh, well, I accidentally drew my pistol and shot them instead of my taser. Therefore, we'll sweep it under the rug. No. You should never be in law enforcement again. You're not cut out for it. The end. Maybe we can train to fix that. Sure. But right now, with the issues that we have in the world, you are not cut out to be a law enforcement officer. And most of you folks, let me just tell you up front, let me be a little sexist here. Most of the women I've ever worked with, they're good in the capacity of reasoning with men, especially like violent type men. They tend to listen to women a little bit better sometimes. But for the most part, when, things hit the fan, they weren't around. They weren't around to back you up, or they freaked out, or whatever else. It's one of those things, because women generally aren't geared in their nature toward that. In the jail I worked in was not big, because there's not a gigantic population in the county, but several hundred inmates, close to 500, I think, when we were at max capacity. And some of you might think, oh, that's tiny, and it is. But some state prisons only have a few thousand inmates, like 2,000. So to just give you some idea, and of that, I'd say generally we were around, the majority of the years I was there, around 400. And of that, about 50 to 90 were females. So we can see that the males outpace the females in arrests. And this is just statistically known, because women are not as disagreeable as men. They don't tend to be as aggressive. They don't tend to make as dumb choices as far as personal safety or exhilaration or whatever else, right? And so men tend to be more of the criminal type. They also tend to be more of the protector type. Women protect children, but wrestling around with dudes and telling them and giving them commands and authorities, it just doesn't work. You ever wonder why some teenage kid will laugh at a female cop, or somebody, who has no care for authority or no respect for an individual will just beat the crap out of a woman? Well, that's why. They're men. They don't care. They're men, and another man they might try it with, but they know there's a potential consequence. Usually when someone attacks you so boldly, a criminal, it's because they think they're going to get away with it. This kid thought he was going to drive off. This kid thought he was going to be all right. So, again, going through this, the woman should not be working on the force anymore. The woman made a horrible mistake that was the department's fault, most likely, because she was not trained well. She drew her pistol, shot at him, and thought she had a taser. If they trained properly, she would have drew a taser with the left hand, and there would have been no mistake. I don't know how she confused the two, but again, that is a failure to train. None of this has to do with the race of the individual. And the individual, by the way, as far as I understand, is half white. He's half white. Not that that makes a big difference, but it should be factored in, because we're not worried about the cops killing a half white guy. We're worried about cops killing the half black guy, because that is the narrative. And if you recall, the COVID versus Riot season was a joke from last year, but the reality is that it's been winter. It has been very, very cool, and it is just now warming up, which is why they're coming back out. I was pretty much being very, very doubtful that Antifa and the rest would come out in the winter and occupy Washington like they said that they were going to. I was pretty sure that wasn't going to happen. And it didn't. DC's too freaking cold. I know. I live in the area, right? Close enough, at least. It's not a fun place in the summer either because it's quite humid, but in the wintertime it's quite cold, and I knew they weren't going to occupy it. Of course, Biden was given the presidency, and that kind of sort of settled some things, but it's not going to settle everything. And a lot of you voted. A lot of you not listening to me, right? A lot of people out there voted for Joe Biden. And you voted for Joe Biden because somehow you thought it would stop the riots. And it's not going to, because these folks will riot until their communist utopia comes into place. Joe Biden said we we're going to have a dark, dark winter, and he was absolutely 100% wrong about that. He's been wrong about many things. Of course, we know he's a known plagiarist, a liar. He is quite nefarious in his sniffing and touching and whatever else, to the point where a Secret Service agent, I should say, filed a complaint some years ago while Biden was vice president because he physically sexually assaulted the Secret Service agent's girlfriend, and he almost got decked over it, apparently. That sort of got buried. That story did come out, though, via Judicial Watch last year, if I'm not mistaken. I believe all of this. I look at how Hunter Biden is and the weird thing going on there. Him and his brother's ex-wife all smoking crack together while he's getting a hooker pregnant. No, I do believe in redemption, 100%. Or not a hooker, sorry, a stripper. I do believe in redemption. I think people can change, but I'm not seeing that. We saw that Hunter went to the Ukraine. Joe Biden rigged the system there for him and basically did the quid pro quo that Trump got impeached over. Biden, the sitting president, did what the former president was actually impeached over, and was 100% guilty. And we have him on video admitting it. People don't pay attention. And they don't pay attention to what these riots are really about. This was never about the Orange Man. This isn't about black lives. Folks, if this was about black lives, there would be rioting every weekend about gang members, because there are probably 20 or 30 or 50 black folk killed every weekend in the inner cities in the United States. Literally. Most of the mass shootings in the United States are caused by gang violence, inner city violence, oftentimes drive-bys, although I'm not sure that's as popular as it once was when I was a kid in the 90s. What I can tell you is that on the grander scale of things, we know statistically that inner city crime, regardless of ethnicity, is higher. Because it's not just blacks, right? It's whites and Hispanics as well. It's the inner city crime, though. And then we have to start saying, well, what's the problem there? Well, maybe it's the fact that it's the inner city. Maybe there's no jobs. Maybe the cities are too expensive. Maybe the government's giving too many handouts. Maybe, probably, the most important factor is there are no fathers in the home. I think that much of the issue with the Bidens and Hunter and whatever else went on is because Joe was too busy playing politician and not busy enough being a father. So just some interesting things seen. I have not quite yet had the experience of this, although I tried to replicate it. But I typed in riots. Now, Tim Poole reported earlier today that typing this in, and I'd seen some memes about this, brought up riots in Belfast because there's some stuff going on in Northern Ireland. But my Google search, and I did this from various servers, or not servers, good Lord, folks, I can't. How do you get to your internet? Whatever Chrome is, DuckDuckGo, all that stuff, yeah. Whatever those words are that I cannot recall off the top of my head because I'm having a tremendous brain fart. In any case, here we finally have some of this, but it says, broadcast networks avoid calling chaos And Minnesota, a riot. Minnesota shooting, man confronts, da-da-da-da. And it goes on. And then if you put in peaceful protest, you have Biden calls for peaceful protest after police shooting. Peaceful protest in New York after fatal police shooting. And of course, we know that they're rioting. And it doesn't matter who this person is. Like, it doesn't matter. This guy's a kid brandishing a gun and the Democrats are anti-gun. He's still going to be a hero, I promise you. There will be memorials that this will be the most woke, generous, nice kid ever, except for when he was doing crimes and slinging drugs. And by the way, folks, I'm not against these guys wanting to do the hustle. That's fine. It's not the problem. The problem is the drugs are illegal. And therefore, you have to create your own police force. You get involved in a gang life and you're doing unmitigated violence toward each other because you have to, because you have no recourse, legal recourse to go to the police. The drug war is a bad thing and it creates problems and it helped facilitate these riots. I can connect the dots and piece them all together. So here we have, if we type in, again, peaceful protest, we get that top story. And then 93% of all Black Lives Matter protests have been peaceful. Yes, just like 93% of all serial killers are peaceful until they kill you. I mean, a serial killer has only killed 50 people in his life, but has had interactions with hundreds of thousands. They're only like 0.0001% violent, right? Most of the riots, regardless of what Time had said in that article from last year, were not peaceful. Most of the people there may have not been arsonists or looters, although they were all loiterers. And most of them probably weren't starting fights or doing crazy things, vandalizing buildings or any of that. But it doesn't matter because you've associated yourself with that. You've associated yourself with that. You were in it. You were involved with it. You were part of it. And unless you at those protests are going to stop people from jumping on police cars and vandalizing them, breaking in the windows, burning down buildings, like they did the other day in Portland where they burned a federal building, unless you are going to do anything about that, in your protest, you're complicit. And we've seen incidences of that in the summertime. So here from DuckDuckGo, I put in riots and I get a good amount of news and recent news and pictures in comparison to Google's lackluster. Let's see. I can go to view all here for news. Judge releases Trump appointee charge in Capitol riot. Nobody cares. I mean, that's a good thing, but that's not the riot we're talking about. This is crazy that Google would do this. It's literally redirected to a Trump article at the top, right? Literally. To say, oh, let's not talk about what's going on now. Let's talk about something that happened on January 6th, weeks ago, and was nothing. It was literally nothing. A bunch of people walked through the Capitol building. A woman named Ashley Babbitt was shot by a federal officer, and we have yet to find out his identity. Nothing else happened, guys. I mean, yeah, there was pepper spray. Yeah, there were some angry people. It was nothing. Data about Capitol riots serves another blow to white working-class Trump supporter narrative. 1 day ago from the Washington Post. 1 day ago. Well, that would have been yesterday, wouldn't it? Unless that was Sunday it was released. Weren't these riots started on Sunday? Congressman reacts to CNN calling Minneapolis riots a protest. Get the story straight. Well, yeah, of course, Fox News. And then it's talking about Portland and whatever else. But this is the difference. Clear the Capitol, Pence pleaded. Timeline of riot shows. Again, why is the AP putting a timeline of the riot out of today when there is riots going on across the nation over some kid who resisted arrest and some woman who made a tragic mistake? By the way, folks, probably no different than the mistake of the female officer that came home from work and shot the man at her home. I don't think she did that on purpose. I think she was really tired. Like, I don't know what her shift was. I don't recall. The story's been a while. But I've literally done 16-hour shifts and just crashed, come home, passed out, live 15 minutes from work. So not a long drive, come home, do whatever, pass out, get up, 6-7 hours, get ready, go back to work. I don't think you guys understand, many of you, the lifestyle that people who are these sheepdogs, the protectors of society, live most of the time. It's not easy. It's rough. And in fact, it's why we have a high divorce rate. It's why we have early death. And it's not something that pays well or attracts intelligent people, because most of the time, intelligent people can make money, more money, better money, doing something less stressful, less dangerous. So here I put in peaceful protest, by the way. This is DuckDuckGo, and it says 5 most peaceful protests that led to social changes. Nothing about anything until we get down here to the Time magazine article about that, and it's all stupid. And then finally we get down to news, calls for peaceful protest. But it wasn't the top stories. And again, when DuckDuckGo does this, Congressman reacts to CNN calling Minneapolis riots peaceful protest or protest. Top stories here from Google immediately puts you back on the trail of Trump. Oh, here is the Washington Examiner 2 hours ago. Man confronts CNN reporter covering Brooklyn Center riots. Violent riots have broken out in Northern Ireland. Okay, it's relevant. It's not the only thing. Photo shows armed civilian guarding businesses from looters. So mostly, given that I'm in the United States, I am using a VPN right now, but given that I am in the United States, mostly it's showing me U.S. news. So that's good. Now, here's another thing, lastly, that I kind of wanted to cover with all of this. Like, there's a lot here, right? I'm talking about this kid. I don't know much about him. I just know it obviously seems like he's in the gang life, right? He's in the cool kids club. He probably doesn't have a dad. He is not a good kid. It's just the reality, guys. I showed you some of the video. We see that the woman draws her pistol, has no clue. I don't know how you have no idea which weapon you have in your hand, but I get what stress does to you. I've been in plenty of stressful, combative situations, so I get it. But again, total mistake. There should have been a press release from the police department, something. It doesn't matter, though. Much like if George Floyd gets convicted not George Floyd, Derek Chauvin gets convicted or not. It doesn't matter. There will be riots regardless. But here, this is an interesting thing because of all that insurrection stuff we just showed you that Google's putting out. Here I put in FBI and Antifa. First thing comes up. FBI director says Antifa is an ideology, not an organization. Well, thank you. FBI enlists Proud Boys leaders, so it goes back to Proud Boys and whatever else. We can go through the articles. Enlists Proud Boys, so again, goes back to Trump. Oh, that was from 2 weeks ago. Well, that's an old story. How American surveillance network helped the FBI catch the Capitol mob. Okay. Biden steps up federal efforts to combat domestic extremism. And what do they show? Well, they show some Boogaloo Boys, or they show some 3%ers. They show some patriots one way or another. The Boog Boys are actually very sympathetic to Antifa, so not that they're a monolith per se, but yeah. FBI agent speaks to Princeton police cadets. And then here in it, it says the KKK, or some of your Antifa. Okay, well, why are you saying KKK? KKK is non-existent in the United States. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It's not influential and it does nothing, or we would be seeing news reports about it all the time. Antifa is a threat. What in the world is wrong with our media, our DOJ, our State Departments, our FBI? What is wrong with Homeland Security? All the way down here, finally, from Reuters, FBI chief says U.S. Antifa demonstrators are targets of multiple probes. That's, again, it's from last year, though. Last year, Antifa doesn't have clear organization. Well, I would beg to differ, given that they are all over the internet. The internet world lets you connect Antifa members together. Twitter still hosts these people. Facebook, many of people. They're not banning them. They're all over Reddit. I am subbed to many of the Reddit pages because I'm not really on Reddit anymore. I haven't messed with Reddit in months, actually. But because I want to know what's going on. I want to watch. I want to hear what they have to say. I want to hear their stupid nonsense. And here, just again, a comparison. DuckDuckGo, and we have very much the same thing. Yet, this unorganized organization has its own flag, has its own black bloc, has its own website. Again, I've covered all this in the past. But the FBI isn't able to take it down. It's quite strange to me. Quite strange. Quite strange that we are rioting because a woman who probably shouldn't have been a cop in the first place, with no real experience, and I'm sure this will pan out more. Guys, I've read very little about this, but we'll find out who this cop is. Guarantee you, very little experience, very almost no experience in confrontational situations, or if so, a male took care of it. The fact that she drew her firearm over a taser tells me she wasn't well trained. And Minneapolis can't afford that after the whole Derek Chauvin thing, right? Why are we focused on right-wing extremists, which aren't even right-wing, because like that actually has a meaning. It means that you are for the old guard or the old establishment, right? Which in the United States is the constitutional establishment, which was never a document about keeping people enslaved. It was just something they didn't know how to deal with at the time. Frederick Douglass understood this. He knew this. So laissez-faire capitalism has nothing to do with Nazis either, because Nazis are a command control economy, much like the communists are. I don't get these ideas, other than these people have lost their mind and they're trying to push a narrative to control you. They're trying to cause you to fear. They're trying to demoralize you. They're trying to do everything that they can to basically have you go crazy. And look, guys, it's crazy land. Donald Trump was the president. Joe Biden, a senile old man who cannot, as I speak, I misspeak, right? Cannot form a coherent sentence, right? He's got all this trouble with his son, his family. We know he's a plagiarizer. We know all these things about Joe Biden. Yet he's the solution. He's the ultimate solution. And here we are once again just ignoring Antifa. I think the best thing that could happen right now is that, much like the wall, like Joe Biden resumed construction on the wall because, well, reasons, he's going to start targeting Antifa because, again, reasons. And the real reason is the establishment is in power. So, guys, I know that was a lot. It was all over the place. It's kind of my style, right? Just random thoughts, random things out there. But keep in mind that we're going to continue to see more riots as things get warmer, just because they're going to riot. It doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter what happens. This is about power. It doesn't matter that Black Lives Matter is an organization that is constantly debunked in the media. It doesn't matter that we have 100 years of history of this, of communist movements all throughout the world, but especially the rise of communism in the United States. Doesn't matter about all the warnings we've had. Doesn't matter about all the documents. Doesn't matter about all of us personalities who are anti-commies. I'm against slavery, which means I'm against communism. And you commies out there, you're all pro-slavery and you're idiots for thinking otherwise, because you just want to enslave folks. You can't be free with the government pointing a gun in your face, forcing you to work, paying you the same wage as your neighbor next door who doesn't do jack. And it doesn't really work out to any sort of utopia, folks. But yeah, just a bunch of thoughts on all of this. So I guess I'm going to leave it there. I don't know what else to tell you other than expect more riots. I would stay away from these things. It is incumbent of you to stay away, because if you get involved, you're going to be a target. And just like the Capitol insurrection, doesn't matter what they do. you will be pointed to as a horrible, disturbing, deplorable person who should not be allowed in polite society, as Keith Olbermann said. Know your enemy, understand what's going on, assess the situation correctly. That's all I have for today, folks. This has been all -1 quick shots, and I wish you all well.